representative from Florida. She represents the 27th Congressional District. She served as chairwoman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee from 2011 to 2013. In 1989, she became the first Cuban American and the first Latina to be elected to Congress. She was also the first Republican woman elected to the House from the state of Florida, and is currently the most senior Republican woman in the U.S. House. In terms of her staunch defense for freedom and democracy in the hemisphere, Ms. Ros Lehtinen has inscribed the most generous pages in the region's fight against dictatorship. She is a soldier of freedom, and we are so fortunate to have her in Congress and in public life in the United States. Thank you, Ileana.
Well, thank you so very much. I thank you for your patience. I'm not running on Cuban time. I was in the Senate, and as you know, they just talk and talk and talk, and I couldn't get out of that meeting fast enough. Thank you so much. Muy buenos días. Tan agradecida a todos mis amigos, que en eso es todos ustedes, pero gracias a los que organizaron este tremendo evento. I am so happy to be with you here this morning. First, I want to thank the institute that put this together. That's the Interamerican Institute for Democracy, and I see they have a brand new book out, and I thank my dear friend Carlos for that. At this organization, well, I'm so pleased to call that calls my district its home. So I thank you for putting this together, for hosting the event, for all of the panelists. But I especially want to thank my very dear amigo, Carlos Sanchez Pezrain, for putting together this forum. Carlos and I have been friends for many, 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 many years. I was young and I was thin, and he's always been handsome. So, but I know that you've already heard about the threats that rogue regimes like the ones in Cuba, like the one in Venezuela, but sadly, that's not the end of them. What these regimes, the threat that they pose to our national security and to the security and stability, indeed, of the entire Western Hemisphere. This should concern us all. And Carlos has put together excellent panels, all of whom I've had the pleasure of working with over the years. And so I don't want to repeat what you've already heard or will be hearing from them. But I wanted to briefly give you some of this from a different perspective, from my perspective as a Cuban American. As you know, I came to the United States at a young age. I was 8 years old. I was born in Cuba, and I came as a little girl along with my family, fleeing the communist Castro regime. And where I was born is not just a place on my passport. It has defined how I view the world through the prism of democracy, through the prism of freedom and human rights and the rule of law. And these are principles that have really should form the basis of thought and strategic planning for U.S. foreign policy. Sometimes we veer away from that, and it's to our detriment. I mean, for a girl to have fled a communist regime as a child, and only to grow up in this amazing country, the United States of America, and then to have become the first Hispanic woman elected to Congress, it says a lot, not about Ileana Ros Lehtinen. It says a lot about the opportunities that exist in this great country for every freedom-loving in the world. And I became the first woman to ever chair an original standing committee in Congress, the Foreign Affairs Committee, located not too far from here. And it was one of the committees, as our republic got stood up and formed, that was part of the original Congress. That's pretty amazing. But we don't see that happening everywhere in the world. We see rogue regimes that are that seek to undermine our values and the values that should be universal values, values from God, from our Creator, freedom. Every person deserves to be free. Human rights, the dignity of the individual. And we see rogue regimes trying to destroy that spirit of freedom in every person. We see it in Iran, we see it in Russia, we see it in North Korea, we see it in China, and they have found a willing partner in Cuba, my native homeland, just 90 miles from our shore. And little by little, we have witnessed how other countries throughout our hemisphere, Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador, Nicaragua, have taken a page out of Castro's playbook, and they've been systematically dismantling democratic institutions and recurring human rights violations. And now we've accepted that as well. That's just the way that business is done there. Instead of having an election in Cuba, we're going to have a succession. The power dynasty continues. That is unacceptable. And that is why throughout my years in Congress, I have fought for those who suffer under tyranny and continue to suffer under tyranny. And I wear it as a badge of honor when thugs like Fidel Castro once called me La Loba Feroz, the ferocious she-wolf. And when Chavez called me an outlaw. Thank you. And more recently, Ortega banned me from entering Nicaragua. Cuba has strengthened its relationship with U.S. adversaries, signaling new cooperative agreements with Iran, and it's negotiating new energy deals and infrastructure projects with Russia. China and Russia are getting a real entry into the Western Hemisphere. This should worry us all. Iran and Russia have increased intelligence and military alliances right here in our own area, not too far from America's shores, and that is a terrible threat. We cannot shrug it off and say it doesn't matter. It matters because the Western Hemisphere matters greatly to the security and the safety of the United States. Now, there have been recent reports that the Kremlin has reached an agreement with Castro to reopen the listening facility in Lourdes. As you know, that was a very active spy satellite there, and then it went dormant. Well, now Russia is interested once again in reactivating this spy facility in Lourdes. This is provocation from Russia. We cannot treat this as just a normal occurrence. This is Russia provoking the United States, and it seeks to spy on our interests. It undermines our national security, and it does not stop in Cuba. And as someone who doesn't take for granted the ideals and the values and the freedoms that we enjoy as Americans, this is truly a chilling thought to see that these communist ideas and communist actors are trying to spread across our region. People like to say that the Cold War is over. It is not. And say that to the 11 million people who suffer under the yoke of failed communist ideology in Cuba. And we look at Daniel Ortega. He has agreed to allow Russia to establish a satellite station in Nicaragua under the guise of a counter-narcotics operation. Who would think that Daniel Ortega is a willing partner in counter-narcotics operations? Of course he's not. In addition, one of Nicaragua's latest military acquisitions involved receiving 50 T-72B1 battle tanks from the Russians. Battle tanks in Nicaragua. And it has intentions to obtain at least a dozen Russian Yak-130 fighter jets. Who's at war with Nicaragua? And MiG-29 fighter bombers. So they've got fighter bombers, they got fighter jets, and they have tanks from the Russians in Nicaragua. What is going on there? Now, Russia's projection of power, as well as its deployment of intelligence assets throughout the region, should certainly be of concern to us here in the United States. This creates new vulnerabilities here at home. In addition, Iran has also been steadily solidifying its foothold on Latin America, particularly during the tenure of the last administration. If recent reports of the size and the scope of Hezbollah's operations in Latin America are true, this puts the terror group, Hezbollah, awfully close to the United States, and it is a direct threat to our security. We have no time to waste in addressing this threat, and that is why I wrote to the administration urging it to take immediate steps to disrupt Hezbollah's financial networks, which are vast, and to attempt to reverse the damage that it has already caused. Now, Iran has its proxy, Hezbollah, and they want to circumvent sanctions. They want to go around the sanctions. They want to counter U.S. influence. They want to make use of the growing networks of transnational organized crime in order to finance its own terror activities. That is happening. Iran has opened up more than 80 cultural centers in Latin America. Now, do you think that's to approve visas because Latin Americans have expressed a great interest in going to Iran on vacation? But just think, Iran has 80 cultural centers in Latin America. When was that happening? 20 years ago. But they want to export its toxic brand of political influence and serve its interests, focusing on partnering with nations well known for their anti-American rhetoric. And again, we are seeing terrorist groups forge connections to drug cartels in the region, forging a deeper narco-terror connection that is funding so many of the terror groups and their activities. Drug trafficking funds terrorism. It's that simple. Drug trafficking is funding terrorism. And reports of the connections between Hezbollah and the FARC, the murder of Special Prosecutor of Argentina, Alberto Nisman, and the alleged conspiracy between the previous government of Argentina, Venezuela, and Iran to cover up Hezbollah's activities and involvement in the EMEA Jewish Community Center in Buenos Aires do nothing to quell doubts about Iran's activities in Latin America. Alberto Nisman, as we know, he believed, and he had proof, that Iran had been setting up intelligence networks, recruiting individuals through its embassies, through its cultural organizations, and through its mosques. Iran has set up shop because they want to get their tentacles all over Latin America, and they saw this as their opportunity. Nisman's death must be investigated in a comprehensive manner, in a transparent manner. We've got to search for the truth. We've got to work on EMEA nonstop, because they assassinated Nisman, mysterious circumstances at best of his death, thinking the investigation is going to die with him. We've got to continue that investigation. So my commitment stands and has always stood with the people of the region, with the United States, with our partners who want democracy, who want freedom, who respect the rule of law, who like the separation of powers. Because I know what it means to live under a communist regime. And I don't think that anyone wants to live in a communist regime. People want to be free, free to make their own choices, free to think what they want to think, free to write, free to talk about these important items like Carlos's Institute is. So it's very important for each one of us, cada uno de nosotros, to work together, to shine a spotlight and to denounce the atrocities that are being committed in Latin America. Because it is happening. Democracy is under threat. And I am confident that with forums like this, which publicly denounce such abusive tactics, we will make progress in educating Congress on the realities that are ongoing throughout our hemisphere. Así que yo simplemente le quiero dar las gracias a este instituto, a esta fundación, a los panelistas, a la audiencia, a los organizadores, porque gracias a todos ustedes vamos a darle la realidad, mostrarle la realidad a todas las personas que piensan que todo en Latinoamérica está bien, que no hay problema, que democracia está fuerte, que no tenemos que preocuparnos de este sector del mundo. Es preocupante y ustedes están en la vanguardia y nos van a salvar. Así que gracias, Carlos, gracias a todos ustedes, muy agradecida. Y de aquí al Intelligence Committee, donde tenemos a Steve Bannon testificando. Así que, wow. Bueno, muchas gracias. Y me voy a robar el libro. Muchas gracias. Todos son amigos, colegas y los quiero mucho. Y perdón que llego tarde y me voy temprano. Gracias, 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 gracias.